was he on about? My body, mister, come figure it out with the Sonnet Sisters.
Neighbours, Godspeed! Welcome back to Sonnet Sisters. My name is Anna, and today I will be looking at sonnet number 23, which as an actor is quite a dear one to my heart.
What is the meaning of this?
As an unperfect actor on the stage, who with his fear is put beside his part, or some fierce thing replete with too much rage, whose strength's abundance weakens his own heart, so I, for fear of trust, forget to say the perfect ceremony of love's rite, and in mine own love's strength seem to decay, o'ercharged with burden of mine own love's might. Oh, let my books be then the eloquence and dumb presages of my speaking breast, who plead for love and look for recompense, more than that tongue that more hath more expressed. Oh, learn to read what silent love hath writ, to hear with eyes belongs to love's fine wit. So, first impressions. This poem is pretty awkward to read aloud, which I think is kind of the point. It's a very beautiful poem on the page, but out loud, quite difficult. You may have noticed around line 12, more than that tongue that more hath more expressed. Nobody wants to read that aloud. So my general impressions of this sonnet were that the speaker is overwhelmed by a kind of love, and they find it difficult to express in speech, so they are asking to express it via the written word instead. They believe that writing serves love better than the spoken word. I think it's quite fitting, therefore, that it's quite a beautiful poem to read but not to say. And tonally it did strike me that it's a very pleading, kind of desperate poem, and it has a lot of oh sounds of despair, and it's very self-deprecating. So let's attempt a modern translation. And my version of that goes something like this. Like an actor who forgets his lines and drops character because of stage fright, or like a wild animal so overcome with anger that it loses self-control, because of my own fear, I cannot say or do what is expected when one is in love. I wilt from the magnitude of my feelings, my love, burdened with more weight than I can carry, from the power of my love. Let my eyes tell you what my breath cannot. My eyes appeal to you in the name of love, and they ask you for a response, more clearly than I could with speech, even if I was more eloquent. Learn the language of my eyes, maybe read body, and what it has written for or to you. To communicate in this way is how the God of love intended, or he would approve of this method of communication, or it worked for him. So to further our modern translation or understanding of this sonnet, let's look at a few specific words and phrases and what they mean. In line 3, fierce thing is said to be a wild animal, but I like the way that his wording leaves this open to interpretation. Line 4, strength's abundance. This is said to mean an excess of rage. And in the same line, the word heart is said to replace courage. So an excess of rage weakens his courage. And if we're thinking about this in terms of love, maybe this is an excess of passion which weakens his courage. Line 5, for fear of trust. This could be a fear of trusting oneself, one's body, one's mind, one's words, if they feel they don't have control of those things. It could also be a fear, perhaps, of trust that's been placed in them, perhaps by the subject of the sonnet. Line 6, the perfect ceremony of love's rite. Here we get back to lovely traditional values. So what is the perfect ceremony? Is it ultimate goals? If we're looking at traditional or old-fashioned values or common values, would those be sex and or marriage? Is the writer of the sonnet unable to perform either of these things for some reason? Maybe the intense pressure of his feeling prevents him from performing how he would wish to. The word write is written, R-I-T-E, but of course we all know that the spellings and the edits of these sonnets have changed many times over the years, and if it's being said aloud, you can reinterpret that as write, R-I-G-H-T, which could imply, what is my lover's right to demand from me? Which again could relate to sex, it could relate to something that they expect to be said to them that this person isn't able to say. Line 7. And in mine own love's strength seem to decay. Decay perhaps could relate to impotence, which of course would fit the reading of sex when we look at perfect ceremony of love's right and being unable to perform. Line 8, o'ercharged. This really makes the most sense when read in with the rest of the line. O'ercharged with burden of mine own love's might. O'ercharged means overladen, like a pack horse who you have put too many bags on. I quite like the idea that overcharged here means overwhelmed by the physical or sexual prowess of one's lover. Line 9 incurs hot debate over whether books or looks was the original wording in this line. Oh, let my books or looks be then the eloquence. I quite like how both work, but let's break each one down. What does books evoke for you? For me, it evokes bookish, narcissistic, pompous, literary, academic, distancing, brings an object in between them, perhaps introverted, maybe autistic, maybe an asexual expression of love. What does looks say? Looks is a far more direct, personal contact, but it's less outgoing. There's a please notice me kind of vibe, or a let my beauty speak for itself because I can't, or a let my beauty speak for itself because I can't win you with cleverness. Let me know in the comments down below whether you think it should be books or looks, and which one would win your heart. Some of the debate against the word books goes like this. Books is less likely because it seems to elevate his plays, which he's most likely referring to if we're considering that it's written by Shakespeare. It elevates the books to published status. It also elevates the power of verse above speech, and Shakespeare does exactly the opposite in a lot of his sonnets. The possibilities, if you replace the word books with looks, are endless. How many love stories are we told that don't involve looks? Line 10. A presager is a messenger or a prophet of sorts. So this introduces a little element of foreboding or something ominous. So dumb presagers could be a mute messenger or a silent kind of signal. Dumb presagers could also be said to refer to dumb shows which preceded Elizabethan plays. In line 10 he also refers to his speaking breast, which I find interesting because is he separating that from his feeling breast? Line 11, recompense. We're told this means some kind of response. It could also be read to mean rescue. Rescue me from my feelings for you. And now we get back to line 12, my favourite. Personally, I refuse to think that this is clever. I think it is forced and I hate it. However, we're here to admire his genius. So I believe line 12 means something along the lines of, my eyes ask more love in response to the asking than those who are better with speech or are more readily charming, quick thinking. I'm inclined to include the idea that this is about quick thought because of the use of the word wit right at the end. Learn to read what silent love hath writ. I take this to mean, learn to read the silent messages that my eyes or that my books have written for you. And in line 14 we have a really gross image, frankly. To hear with eyes belongs to love's fine wit. Did you know that Cupid was blinded, but in compensation he heard with his eyes? I don't really understand the train of thought that led them to assign an extra task to the organ that they'd just ruined, but there you go. Let's talk about themes. I cleverly picked up on fear, love, strength, weakness, speech versus text, or verbal versus non-verbal, and onto imagery. We have images of acting, wild animals, eyes, hearing, dumb presages or mute messengers, a speaking breast. I've written silent love writing, and I'm not sure what I meant by that. In terms of tone, this is a very shy, self-deprecating, pleading poem. Structurally, I do not like this sonnet. If you say each line out loud, it feels like you're tumbling down a flight of stairs. As an unperfect actor on the stage, who with his fear is put beside his part, there's lots of awkward sounds. P's and B's. And then we get to line 5, so I for fear of trust forget to say. That's a really faffy line. That's a really awkward, nervous line to say. I think line 5 is the most awkward line in the sonnet in a beautiful way, and yet every other line is awkward in a really true, ugly sense. So there's less consistency throughout the lines. O'ercharged with burden of mine own love's might. That's a really clunky line, and there's no consistency in the sounds within that line. Whereas line 5, so I for fear of trust forget to say, that's a lot of similar sounds, so it's pretty beautiful but in an awkward way still. So what is this poem really about? Is it about stage fright literally for an actor, or is it about stage fright in love? Is acting the object of this person's love? Are his plays, his books, his dumb presages? Maybe he loves acting so much that he can't do it effectively. He spills his love over onto the page. Can you really love acting so much that you become bad at it? But then what sense is there in a love that makes us silent under its weight? If you love and don't say anything in the forest, do you really love? And yet that is very patently, potently true. Is this a fan letter to a fellow poet that Shakespeare idolised? Is Shakespeare reclaiming his fan status despite a comparative lack of vocalness? Personally, as a fan of things who doesn't necessarily make videos about everything they love, or buy all the merch, or talk about something they love constantly, I can understand the position of being less vocal and consequently being made to feel that your love for something is less valid. So talk to me, what is this actually about? What is it really about? Do we take this sonnet at face value? Or are there other reasons that this love can't be spoken? Is it forbidden? There aren't really many leads on this train of thought, but it's nice to consider. If we're thinking about performance and words and speaking as a way of communicating love or communicating a message and that not being effective, I have a quote for you. Patrick Cheney spoke of live performances' inability to capture the integrity of timid infatuation, which sounds a bit toxic to me personally, but I understand where the train of thought came from. What do you think? Can you express yourself better in words, verbally, or in written words? Physically, without either? Or with your hearing eyes? Let me know in the comments what you think is the best way to communicate love. In terms of context and setting, I don't think this sonnet has given me very much in the way of imagery to guide me in a particular direction. Yes, I could go stage-wise. I think that might be a little bit boring and perhaps not quite the actual message. So not sure what we're going to do yet for the performance, but tune in next time to see what we did. Until then, rest you merry.